Yeah, this kind of fits right in. So, well, anyway, thank you all for tuning in. I'm looking forward to the talk tonight, and hopefully we will have a good Q&A after the talk is over. So now I'll turn it back to Muhammad. Let him do his thing.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Mhm.
So, our speaker tonight, Nabila Mansour, has spent the last several years working to improve political awareness in underrepresented communities. She is currently the Executive Director of Asian Texans for Justice and the Asian Texans for Justice Action Fund, two civic engagement organizations committed to uniting, organizing, and supporting the AAPI, which is Asian American Pacific Islander Community in Texas. Nabila is also the president of the Texas Multicultural Advocacy Coalition and past executive director of Engage Texas chapter. She has a background in community organizing, leadership development, and strategic planning. She holds a law degree from University of Houston Law Center. Please join me in welcoming Nabila to our monthly meeting. The title of her presentation is Asian Texans Community Profile and Current Issues. Thank you, Nabila.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Mohammed, for having me be here and join you all. I'm really happy that I was able to spend an evening with y'all. I did want to say happy Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. So May is APAM, and it's kind of the one month where we get to kind of celebrate the wide umbrella of folks that make up the Asian American community. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about Asian Texans for Justice. I want to speak a little bit about what our community looks like here in Texas. And then I really wanted to talk a little bit about the Calais decision that passed just last week. I happened to be in New Orleans for a convening where we had a lot of folks that work in the space, and it was a very devastating, heartbreaking decision. But it also gave me hope being in a room and being in community with a lot of other organizations that do this work and knowing much like one of the members here said, that Sam Cooke song, this idea that things are going to change and holding on to that in this time of, well, in this moment where everything just seems to be going so wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and just start sharing. I hope I can share. Yes, I think I can. Oh, send request. Okay. So I would like to share. Okay, perfect. And I go here. And then y'all let me know if you can see. Can y'all see something? Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So Asian Texans for Justice is the group that I'm with. We're actually two organizations, and this one is really talking more about our action fund. We are a statewide group. We have a 501c3, which is called Asian Texans for Justice. And we have a 501c4, which is called Asian Texans for Justice Action Fund. And the idea is that we were created with the idea of really becoming a hub for Asian Americans statewide in order to help mobilize, organize us in order to find a better place where Texas is a better place for everyone. Our mission statement: we envision a future where Asian Texans feel bold in their belonging and are leading the movement toward a more progressive and inclusive Texas for all. What I was thinking is in this APAM month where we celebrate Asian American Heritage Month, I thought it would be good if we could share a little bit about the community. Now, Asian Texans for Justice, one of the things we do, which is a little bit different than some other organizations, is that we really believe in data. And every election year, so every even year, we actually do a poll. And that poll looks to what it is that AAPI Texans believe in and what it is that AAPI Texans are most invested in, and gives an opportunity for us to share out with legislators, with state lawmakers, with really anyone who has a stake in civic life, a little bit about our community. So I wanted to share with you kind of what our community looks like. And it's really long, so we're not going to go over all of it, but we're going to go over some of it so y'all have an idea of what the Asian American community is like here in Texas. So understanding the Texas AAPI community. So AAPI Texans are the fastest growing demographic in the state. We now number over 2 million. We make up about 5% of the voting population. And we are growing in a fashion that is really exponential more than anything else. There are the county with the greatest number of Asian Texans is really Harris County. And I think we'll talk about it a little bit later. But I'm not sure if y'all know this, but the fastest growing Asian community is actually out in North Texas in Collin County. Collin County is not only the fastest growing Asian Texan population, it is the fastest growing AAPI population in the nation. So we're seeing that a lot of folks are moving to Texas. A lot of folks are immigrating to Texas, and they are immigrating to here in ways that we just haven't seen before. And it's changing the demographic makeup of our state. We are in the cities where really the vote counts the most. And we always like to consider Asians as being the margin of victory because we often are. And Asian American communities are spread across the Lone Star State, but for the most part, we live in the big suburban centers, the big cities and the suburban centers. So that's Houston, Dallas, Austin, and San Antonio. And if you were to take the entire Asian Texan population, 90% of them would reside in those big cities, kind of those metropolitan areas. So of course, there are communities that are out in rural areas. We actually have quite a few folks out in Corpus Christi. We have a growing population in the RGV, but for the most part, Asian Texans live in the big cities and their surrounding suburbs. Now, the Asian community is very different than some of the other communities that make that multiracial makeup of America. And the reason it's different is because there are over 70 languages and 50 ethnicities that make up the Asian Texan umbrella. So you can imagine that encompasses a wide variety of cultures, a wide variety of languages, a wide variety of lived experiences. And so it's a little bit hard to organize in our community because while the Latinx community has language that they share across all their cultures, the Black community has this shared experience, right? Like this shared history that they share. The Asian diaspora looks very different. And oftentimes it's very hard to organize in a community that really sees themselves as being part of their own particular ethnic bubble. And I will tell you, I will share the story with you. When I first started getting involved in activism, I did not know that I was Asian. I mean, I just didn't know that that box included me, right? So my parents are from Pakistan. And when I thought Asian, I really thought in my head that it was East Asian. And it wasn't until I started doing activism and working with groups and working in solidarity with other groups, I was like, huh, who knew I'm Asian, right? And so there's a large variety of folks in our community that probably, if you ask them, they probably wouldn't even know or identify as Asian American. They more often than not identify as the country that they come from. So I'm Pakistani American, I'm Chinese American, I'm Vietnamese American, right? But they don't really identify as being Asian American. And that leads to its own issues when you're trying to organize in this community. I did want to point out that we have the largest Indian population out of any state in America. So more Indians live here in Texas than in other states. And they make up the biggest group of the ethnicities that make up the AAPI community. The second largest community in Texas is the Chinese community, and then, no, I'm sorry, the Vietnamese community, my bad. The Vietnamese community and the Chinese community. And the Vietnamese community, I believe, is the second largest. Yeah, it's the second largest Vietnamese community in America. The first largest is in California. So we have a large number of Indian American. We have a large number of Vietnamese in this state, and we have, of course, a lot of Chinese, Pakistani, Filipino. But the big chunk of folks come from the Indian diaspora and the Vietnamese diaspora. Another unique thing about our community, we are a community where the majority of folks that make up the Asian Texan bubble, if you will, speak a language other than English. So try organizing in a community that has 50 different ethnicities, and the majority of them speak a language that's not English, right? So we have our own challenges and barriers when we are trying to activate this community. And most of the folks that make up this community are new to this country. They're immigrants. They are not born here. I mean, the number is growing, but really, at least now, most of them are immigrant communities. Here's another one. We're talking about Asian Texans. 76% speak a language other than English. So when we're trying to do outreach to this community, we have to be very cognizant of the fact that many of them, English is not their first language. I wanted to do a specific focus on Houston. So I'm going to share this when I get a chance after I'm done sharing. I don't know how to get to the chat when I'm sharing, but I will share with you our website. But I invite you to go and visit our poll. It's actually really great. It goes into, it really does a deep dive into the big metropolitan areas and what the community looks like in each of those areas. But I wanted to concentrate on Houston because we're in Houston. And we are the city with the greatest number of Asian Texans. The Houston area is home to over 600,000 Asian Americans. We are not only one of the biggest communities in Texas, we are actually one of the biggest communities in the country. We are also one of the most diverse. So like I mentioned, in Houston, the biggest chunk is made up of the Indian diaspora. Then it's Vietnamese, then it's Chinese, then it's Filipino, and then somewhere down there it's Pakistani. So those make up the biggest community. We don't have a large community of Korean Americans and Japanese Americans. And that's not the same for all the states. There are very large Korean communities in Illinois, in California. Just here in Houston, we just don't have that many Korean Americans and certainly Japanese Americans. The educational attainment. There is a model minority myth, and that is something that Asian Texans, at least for us as activists, struggle against. There is this thought that Asian Americans tend to be the model minority, and this is used to pit us against other communities. I'm talking the Latinx community, the Black community, oftentimes. We work very hard in our organization to work against this. But having said that, the educational attainment of Asian communities compared to other communities oftentimes is more higher. And that's really because of the history of how we came to this country, the history of how folks came from like places like South Asia or East Asia. Oftentimes they would come to get a post-secondary education, and then they would stay here. And so there's like reasons for it. But this is a problem in our community. We are not a monolith. There are a lot of people that don't have this attainment. There are a lot of people who don't have the wealth that is oftentimes associated with our community. And so it's a struggle to advocate for us when folks have this model minority myth that we always kind of butt heads against. Our community differs in the employment rates. We are oftentimes in the service occupation. Oftentimes we are, depending on our background, many are small business owners. So you'll see like in the management, business, science, and arts occupation, a lot of our community is in there, and that really makes sense. When you're an immigrant, oftentimes the best way for you to kind of climb that social ladder, the economic social ladder, is by owning your own business. So you will find that Asians are oftentimes small business owners. And Houston Asians lead the region in median household income. So again, here you will see that our income by race and ethnicity oftentimes is more greater than other communities. But that does not mean that there are not folks that struggle to make the ends meet all the time, right? Like that is just like every other community. We have folks that span the spectrum of economic wealth. There is significant language diversity within the Houston region. 77%, so 78% of folks speak a language other than English. Now, because of colonialism, a lot of people from South Asia do tend to speak English very well, right? Because of just the systems that were put in place, and teaching English is a big component of countries that make up the South Asian diaspora. But you will find that there are communities where that's not true. So 17.5% of Asian Indians speak English less than very well. But if you look at the Vietnamese and Chinese community, 40.5%, 46.7%. So oftentimes when we're doing ethnic media, or when we're doing digital ads or meta ads, when we're trying to let our community know that like there are elections happening or you should register to vote, we use this information to help us make sure that we are targeting our audiences in a way that we get the most buy-in. So that might mean that we do our ads oftentimes in Vietnamese and Chinese. But because we know that the Asian Indian population, the Asian Pakistani population, which make up a big chunk, oftentimes more than not do speak English. If we have limited budget, we will spend that money more toward Chinese and Vietnamese in language ads than we would Asian Indian ads. And that's just the reality of knowing what our community looks like. This is a little bit, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we did this something different in 2024. And by the way, I should have mentioned that this poll is from 2024. We are right now working on our 2026 poll. We will release it in August, September, and I'm sure I will send it to Muhammad and Ruth to share with you as well. But this is 2024, and we kind of wanted to see what kind of AAPI Texans are there? What are their profiles? Who is an average AAPI Texan voter? So we interviewed 15 Asian Texans, and we interviewed them across the state. And we tried to find out really kind of where they lay within the political spectrum and where they came from in the state, and get an idea of do they lean Republican? Do they lean Democrat? Do they lean independent? And we found that API Texans volunteer and donate their time to civic causes. So a lot of the folks in our community are compelled to take part in the communities that they live in. But they said that there was a lack of information which really hindered their involvement in more civic engagement, right? So they're interested in politics, they want to learn more, but oftentimes the political parties, if you will not reaching out to them. And we find that oftentimes, because we have a community that is oftentimes made up of immigrants, oftentimes comes from countries where voting wasn't really a possibility, wasn't an option, right? If you came from China, what is voting? I mean, you don't even know what that is, right? They don't really know how to take part in the political system. And there isn't really anyone telling them to take part in the political system. And because they are what would be called a unregistered voter, or maybe they're registered and they're not voting, so they'd be labeled a low propensity voter, then political parties will oftentimes not contact them. So if you're running a political campaign and you want to win and you have limited resources, you're going to hit the voters that actually vote, right? You're not going to try to get new voters because you don't have the bandwidth, capacity, money to be able to do that. You're going to hit the people that actually already vote. So it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So like that low propensity Asian voter is not contacted by Republicans, is not contacted by Democrats, is not contacted by anyone. And then because they don't know about the elections, they don't really take part. So it becomes kind of this cycle. Well, because they don't take a part, nobody contacts them. So that's why ATJ and ATJ Action Fund exist, is because someone needs to do that outreach. We always say, like, Asian Texans, it's our job to do that outreach because no one else is going to do it. It's on us to make sure that our communities are activated. So Asian Texans do see voting as a civic duty and a fundamental right. So the majority of Asian Texans do indicate that voting is important. But we know that there are a lot of barriers to vote. And we're going to talk about Calais in a little bit, which is one of them. But there are a lot of anything that makes voting harder for a Texan makes voting doubly hard for Asian Texans because we have language issues. We have low information voters that don't have access to the information they need. So there's just a lot of, any voter suppression just hits our community really hard. Like most other communities, I would say Asian Texans tend to engage more during presidential elections, but less for local and state elections. So those uniform May elections for the school boards and for city councils, oftentimes very low voter turnout, also in our Asian Texan community. Those state elections, the midterms, lower than other communities. So it's a struggle and something that we try to engage with. These are the voter personas that I talked about, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. But what we found was once we interviewed Asian Texans, we were able to kind of delineate them into a profile. And so some of them are community influencers, some are information seekers, some are persuadable. We have issue voters, we have candidate supporters. We kind of run the gamut. And so the community influencers, these are folks that really tend to get their source of information from their friends and family, from the news. Information seekers, these are folks that get all their information from the news and they get their information from the candidates. Persuadable followers, these are folks that really rely on their family and friend, rely on social media, right? So they're oftentimes young. And issue voters, these would be those folks, like I have many community members who will only look to Palestine and see where someone falls on Palestine, vote based on that, right? So these would be those like one issue voters. And they're folks that are inspired by a certain candidate and that propels them into political activity. I'm going to go a little bit more deeper into our policy opinions. What are the priorities of Asian voters? So again, like I mentioned, this is our 2024 poll. So Asian Texans were more motivated to vote in 2024 than they were in 2022, which makes sense. It was a presidential year. Asian Texans differ in their party identification. So here you see the blue, that's Democrat, and the red is Republican. And so you will find that, and I think this mirrors like all Americans, but I'm not sure. Men tend to be more Republican than Democrat, and women tend to be more Democrat than Republican. I will say that we did look at Asian Texans after the 2024 election, and the community did make a rightward shift. And so this is something that we're working with and trying to figure out. We've been doing message testing all of 2025 and even in the beginning of 2026 on seeing what is it that resonates with our community in order to move them to a place where they're voting in a way that is more of their self-interest. Now, like I mentioned, we have a C3 and a C4, and that really falls within our C4 bucket. So C4 is more partisan work and C3 is non-partisan work. API voters have little trust in news sources, right? So you can see here that they do not trust the mainstream news areas. Oftentimes they'll get their information through WhatsApp and WeChat. But even that, again, oftentimes those sources are not very, very reliable. What are the economic issues that are ranked by Asian Texans? Well, of course, jobs in the economy, inflation, healthcare, protection of voting rights, education that always falls on one of the top issues for our community, and then anti-Asian hate. So as you can see, a lot of these issues are really relevant as we are in this moment where a lot of people are worried about their jobs. They're worried about the cost of fuel, of gas. They're worried about inflation. And we see that that's reflected in our community as well. So the community supports healthcare cost-cutting legislation. We find that the community supports mental and behavioral health programs in schools. They believe in gun violence prevention. They support improving Texas's infrastructure and climate, and they want to make voting more convenient. And there is a large support for expanding ethnic studies, including having Asian American studies in the public school system, the K-12 system. And those are all issues. Frankly, these are the issues that we as an organization work on when we do our work. But I can tell you, yeah, maybe I'll just share with you. So that's what they say they want, right? But I will tell you, in 2024, we did exit surveys at polling locations in areas where there were a lot of Asian Texans, mainly in Houston and Texas, Houston and Dallas, sorry. And I remember there was one person who's like, well, do you believe in reproductive rights? Yes, I can't believe this is happening in Texas. What about gun violence, gun laws? Do you think they're too lax? Yes, we have too many guns in Texas. Do you think we're doing enough on climate? No, we're not doing enough on climate. Who did you vote for? Trump. So it was this real kind of a gut job. Like, what is happening? What is happening to our community that says they support all the things, and yet when they get in the ballot box, they're voting for Trump? And so that was a real wake-up call for our organization, that while these issues are really important to the community, they are not moving the community to vote in the way you think they would, right? So we've been doing a lot of soul searching, and I don't know if this is right, but like the message testing that we've done and the work we've done kind of since 2024 has really compelled us to believe that it is economic issues that move our community the most when it comes to voting. They vote their pocketbook. They vote for what they believe is going to be in their economic interest. And in 2024, many of them thought that voting for Trump would be in their economic interest. So API support or opposition to potential legislation. This is really just kind of a rehash of that last one. Yes, they will support all of these things, but they will not follow through in terms of voting, even though they do say they support all these things. We asked Asian Texans that identified as independent, Democrat, or Texas Republicans voting rights garnered bipartisan support across the spectrum. So we do a lot on voting rights in our organization. Hate crimes, as you can imagine, especially after COVID, when hate crimes just rose just exponentially. We know that this is also an issue that is important to our community. Less so for Texas Republicans, but even for them, 69% said that yes, it is somewhat important or very important. We are very highly motivated toward more funding for mental health. And the reason is that oftentimes our community lacks mental health resources, or frankly lacks the understanding of how important mental health is. So when we are at the Texas Ledge, during those legislative years, one of the key things we work on is advocating for more mental health resources in K-12 schools. The number one cause of death for all young people, right, like teenagers, is guns in America. The the number one cause of death for Asian youth is actually suicide. And the reasons are many, right? Because oftentimes Asian youth will not have access to mental health, but for the public school system. There is a stigma against getting mental health in a lot of Asian communities. People don't identify mental health as being a real issue. And so for us, mental health resources in the public school system means mental health resources for Asian youth. Asian Texans are less supportive of taxpayer-funded school vouchers than other communities. So we are, as a group, not supportive of school vouchers. But we do believe if you're going to do school vouchers, you got to give them to everyone. So we've been very supportive of this idea that you can't deny Muslim students school vouchers just because of their faith. But as a whole, we are against school vouchers, and I think that's all I put in terms of our profiles. So I'm going to share I will share it with you as soon as I get to the chat box. In terms of our goals, our goal is, of course, to engage as many Asian Texans across Texas and to get them to vote in all of the elections. There's a lot of elections in Texas. We just finished the May 2nd one. We were talking about all the wonderful things that happened in Pearland. We have another election just at the end of this month, right? The runoff, primary runoffs. So we do just the civic engagement, the basic civic engagement work. We also advocate for policy that is helpful to our community. And we believe if we can advocate for policy that is helpful to our community, it's actually helpful to all communities. We work in partnership with a lot of other different organizations. And then in terms of leadership development at ATJ Action Fund, we are actually actively recruiting candidates that are of Asian descent to run for office, with the idea that if we really want to build power, we can't just have our communities come out and vote. We actually have to have a seat at the table. And that's kind of an encapsulation of kind of what we do. And these are our polling. They're all on our websites on asiantexansforjustice.org. And that QR code, if you go there, will take you to those polls. And this is information about us. You can find us on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, and we are really under ATJ Action Fund. That covers both our C3 and C4. And I would invite all of you to follow us and keep up to date. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to talk a little bit. And I'm sorry, I don't have slides for this, but I did want to talk about one thing that happened last week that I think is really important and is going to affect all the things that I talked about. And that is, of course, the Calais decision that came down last week on Wednesday. It was really interesting. I was actually in Louisiana. I was in New Orleans, and I was at a convening of other organizations like ours. And it was supposed to be a redistricting convening. We were talking about getting ready for the census and talking about what we need to do. And I was, that decision came down as we were kind of listening to our speakers. And it really was a gut punch to us because the Calais decision is really the gutting of the Voting Rights Act that passed in 1965. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about that. It's fresh in my mind because we talked about our entire conference just kind of pivoted and we talked about what it is we can do in this moment. And I wanted to give a chance to share with all of you kind of some of the things we talked about in this convening because, I mean, it is very harmful what happened, what the Supreme Court did in their 6-3 vote. When the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965, the idea was that this act would disallow the drawing of lines based on race. And what the Calais decision did is it basically shot a hole through that Voting Rights Act right in the middle, and there isn't much left. Now, they will tell you, right? The Roberts Court will tell you, no, we didn't get rid of Voting Rights Act. We just changed it and brought it up to date to 2026. But the reality is that what they did was they gutted the Voting Rights Act. And what that means for us is that it is going to be really difficult for us to get fair maps as we look toward the census. Because when the Voting Rights Act said, the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act said that you cannot draw lines based on race or color. And the challenge in Calais was actually put out. The folks that filed Calais were actually non-Black voters, and they argued that Section 2 did not require 2 majority Black districts, and that when you relied on Section 2, it was a violation of the Constitution's guarantee of equal protection. And so before Calais, what you had to do was look at the effects of the lines, right? So if it affected Black voters, or if it affected Asian voters, or if it affected, whatever, Latino voters, then that was disallowed. Now you have to show that when you drew those lines, there was an intention to affect races. And if that intention was to really give yourself only a partisan advantage, that is okay. But the reality is that because people of color tend to vote a certain way, that it is going to be very difficult to prove that any district that comes into play was drawn with a racial intention in mind, right? You can show effects. How do you show intention when you can say that it was a partisan intention? And so we're going to see a real difference in terms of the things we can and can't do. It means that, like, Texas is already gerrymandered. We're going to be even more gerrymandered. And so now I think we're really thinking of how it is that we can kind of work together in a way that's like a post Voting Rights Act reality. And so a lot of us in this space are trying to really figure out what it is we can do, and really start thinking hard of the challenges that are in place, and understanding that we've always been a community that has been very resilient, and that we will keep working until we get to a place where we have a new Voting Rights Act, because we're going to need one. And that, what are the things we can do to ensure we have fair maps? I can share with you that internally what I tell my staff is that it's our goal, and this is more C4, our 501c4 goal, because C3 is supposed to be nonpartisan. Our goal under our C4 is, frankly, really to flip the house. We want to flip the house by 2030, because 2030 would be the census year, and then 2031 is when they would redraw the maps. And so if we can get a House majority on 2030 so that we have a chance at changing the maps, then that will give us some leverage, and we can kind of keep some of the crazy at bay that is happening in the Texas legislature. We're a statewide organization. Our goals tend to be statewide. So we do endorsements in federal and statewide races, but in terms of our activism, we do try to stay within the state. And so that is our goal, is to really try changing the Texas legislature so that we have a fighting chance. And then we work with other groups in order to make that happen. We are working in partnership with other groups, and we have said that there aren't that many Asian heavy districts in Texas, but there are a few, and we are very committed to having them stay Asian or stay in a way that is beneficial to our communities. So I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions, and I'm happy to answer them.
I have to say that that was a very good presentation. I learned a lot, I have to tell you. So thank you for ever so much for attending our meeting tonight. So I don't have any questions, but I sure wanted to share that comment with you.
Thank you.
Ruth. Okay, Ruth.
Yeah, I have a question that's kind of amusing. I'm just thinking about what the people went through who caused the Voting Rights Act to be passed, the struggles that they went through, the violence that they endured, you know. W- is that what do you have a vision of like what it's going to look like to kind of return to have this new, Voting Rights Act? I mean, what are you sort of preparing for, I guess, when you look back in history,
Yeah.
what kind of fight are you preparing for?
Yeah, no, I mean that's a really great question, Ruth. I think for me, the Calais decision was not if decision, it was a when it was going to come down. And we were preparing for the fact that it would come down this way for a really long time. I mean, the writing was on the wall on where the Supreme Court was headed. I will say that we are in the midst of this fight right now. Um, it breaks my heart that in these primary runoffs, we have Congressman Al Green running against Congressman Christian Menifee. We have two historically Black districts, districts that really have a lot of history behind them, right? And what did they do in 2025? They did what to me was an illegal gerrymander in a year that they weren't supposed to. And in a year where our Texas progressives were very courageous and stood up for our communities and left the state in order to stop that illegal gerrymander. And so we are going to see the decimation of Black congressional folks in the federal government. And that is going to be because it is now a race to the bottom. We already saw it in Florida. I was in Louisiana. We had folks that were actually interveners in the Calais case with us in our room. They were part of the case. And they're like, as we are talking about this, there was an announcement by the Louisiana governor that they were going to redraw the lines. Early voting had already, no, early voting hadn't started. I'm sorry, mail-in ballots had already been sent in by folks.
Mhm.
People
From
had already
overseas.
started voting, and they are redrawing the lines because in their mind, now they have a really great argument, right? They're like, oh my gosh, it is actually unconstitutional per the Supreme Court for us to have these lines. So those two Black congressional districts are now in question in Louisiana. We're already seeing Congressman Al Green and Congressman Christian Menifee fighting it out. They should both be in power. They should not have to fight it out. Congressional District 9 was decimated and has now become a Republican district. So it is, we're going to see a lot of, we're going to see a wipeout of really the Black community. The Asian community was not affected that much. We're already been packed in congressional districts. There aren't that many Asian districts, frankly, like in the state, but it has really affected historically Black congressional districts. And I'm afraid that we are going to see more of it. So what is the answer? We need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. It is ready to go. It would be the new Voting Rights Act. And we got to win. We got to win big. We got to win big in
Mhm.
2026.
Yeah.
We got to win big in 2028. And then we have to have elected officials that are courageous enough to pass legislation like the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Do things like expanding the Supreme Court. This Supreme Court is the way it is constituted right now. We don't have a fighting chance.
That's
Have
right.
made very clear that they are making decisions that are in line with one political party. We have to see a change in the Supreme Court, and we need folks that not only win elections but then make some freaking change so we can get out of this situation where we are really working. We are in a place right now where we have citizenship but I would almost argue we don't have representation. We're in a moment right now where we can vote, but our vote, frankly, doesn't matter. In a way, sometimes I feel a little disingenuous when I tell my community to vote because you got to vote, you got to make change. But if you are so gerrymandered that it doesn't matter how you vote, the other side will always outvote you, then what does that actually mean for us? We are US citizens, but do we actually have any representation? So there's like a lot of different feelings that I'm having after this decision. And we need electeds that will actually win elections and then make a change. I think Nilofer has her hand. Oh,
Yeah, Nilofer, go ahead. Unmute and ask.
Oh, thank you, Nabila. Thank you for this great presentation and the information. So I'm trying to remember my original question, but I also feel that we can't be gerrymandered out of the state, right? So we still have that going for us. Oh, my question was about the poll and the voter suppression and voting rights. I found it really, really interesting that even Republicans reported that they care about voting rights. Was there more information in the poll or in the phrasing of the question to indicate whether, that was that caring about voting rights in the way we understand it from a nonpartisan lens and making access to voting easier, or was it more about like election integrity and voter ID and you know what I mean. The right-wing idea of voting security.
yeah, no, thank you for that question, Nilofer. This is a nonpartisan poll, so we did frame it in a way of like, do you believe in voting rights? Do you believe that everybody has access to voting equally? So it was framed in a nonpartisan manner, if that helps. I can't tell you exactly off the top of my head. This was 2 years ago, but I would definitely go onto our website and they'll tell you exactly what the question is if you look at the poll.
All right, thanks so much.
I think Roger had his hand up.
Well, I was getting ready to say something. Then I said, no, I better not say that. But, I still have a hard time. I've told this story before. With two stories. I really have a hard time looking at people and seeing when they talk about standards and values. And we got the worst person that have values and standards representing us and just tearing this country apart. The trust between different groups, there's a lot of distrust, I feel. And the story I heard a long time ago, trust the black woman, follow the black woman's lead. Because when it comes to voting, a large percentage of the women and women in general are going to do the right thing for the masses. And I keep reflecting back to 1965 and what has happened, what you talked about. My grandfather was not able to vote until 1965 because of fear of being lynched before that. So I kind of take this really personal, and we just got to convince people, hey, if we want to make this country better, we got to get on the same team. We may not like the person. We may not like the person because that person is married to this man or she's a female. But letting this guy who has no standards at all, he's just tearing this whole country apart. I mean, I was overseas last year in Korea. And I was getting a suit made. The guy crossed his legs and looked at me and said, how can you guys let that man, a 34 count, he said this, a 34 count convicted felon represent the United States? we used to be up here, and it seems like we're moving so fast to the bottom. The corruption, I'll just shut up. I'm on my soapbox. I'll just shut up. That's enough for me. You guys don't need to hear enough for me. That's it.
I think it
If
was
I enjoyed your presentation.
Thanks,
I would
Roger.
just like to
We had-
highlight what
we had
Neela first said
Julie and,
earlier.
Julie
Yeah.
and then Douglas.
Okay. First of all, I understand Roger's frustration. It is not only it is mortifying that we have become like this is humiliating, not just on a national level, but on a global level, because we are like a joke. We used to be able to I'm sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, but you know what? I relate to what he's saying. I understand his frustration, and it's so difficult to keep from going on a rant. And just but regardless, to the point I was going to make is that I have been a loyal constituent of Representative Al Green for many, many years now, and I'm very, very grateful to have him as my representative. And it's very frustrating that he and another person who may be from everything that I have read about him and heard about him, is a very qualified young man. And it's very frustrating that these two individuals, who are both probably very qualified, are being pitted against each other. Do you have any suggestions on how we can, as constituents, can be supportive of other people that are also very qualified, we want to be supportive of, and
Yeah, I
still
mean,
be loyal to our own, the people, like Representative Al Green, who I will always be loyal to,
yeah,
if,
no,
if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense, Julie. What I would say is, I mean, I don't know what to say about that congressional district race where we have Al Green versus Christian Menifee. But what I will say is that Neilford mentioned before, statewide, you can't gerrymander statewide. We need to get a flip, if you will, on one of three statewide races. Either the governor, lieutenant governor, or the attorney general. Having either one of those is going to help us in this fight against kind of bottom of the barrel gerrymandering that we're going to see, right? Each of those offices can put a stoppage on really unfair maps. And the goal right now is to try to get fair maps. If we can flip the House, maybe we can pass the Barbara Jordan Voting Rights Act, which is kind of the Texas version of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We need new legislation to really work against the Supreme Court, right? What are other things we can do? We have to keep speaking out. Anytime there is more redistricting, and we're going to see it a lot more now, right? You're going to find that there is an opportunity for us to testify. All of us, if we truly believe in a multiracial democracy, we have to go out and speak. And we have to speak up for our communities of interest and let them know that this is unacceptable. So it's going to be a lot of work, but I mean, we've been there before. This is in the DNA of this country, and we can't keep our eyes off the ball, and we have to keep trying. So so while I also hear you and see you, all of you, and it's been a really difficult couple of days since this happened, it just means that we have to keep up the fight. And I do think we're going to pass it. I actually do believe we're going to pass it. I think we are going to pass a new Voting Rights Act. I think we're going to come out stronger on the other side. And we
Did you say that was the Barbara? Did you say that was the Barbara Jordan Voting Act?
In Texas, yes.
In Texas,
They have tried to
okay.
pass the Barbara Jordan Voting Rights Act. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Douglas, your turn.
Yeah, a month or two before Calais, I heard Sherilyn Ifill on TV, and she said the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, those were not goodies for Black people. That was strengthening democracy, and I found that to be an important perspective. It gives me a vocabulary. And after Calais, I looked at several news reports all around the internet, and they all say this was goodies for Black people, and now the Black people are suffering with Calais. But Vox, VOX, they took a perspective on the Voting Rights Act just a few days before Calais, and they started the 12-minute YouTube video by saying the Voting Rights Act is good for everybody. So when I hear you talk about AAPI and how you're fighting for AAPI, it gives me an important perspective. So when I talk to other people, I can tell them, you know, we're not like crabs in a barrel all fighting. It's not a zero-sum game for power. This is strengthening democracy when we get advances for AAPI and so forth and various heritage months. We're not dividing, we're not fighting each other, we're strengthening democracy. So thanks for listening.
Yeah. I think the last question is, I think Najam put a question in the chat, Nabila.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. What was the question?
Najam, you want to unmute and ask?
Sure. So thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ask your opinion about like how we might get more people from religious communities to participate in elections and to get the young people out to vote, especially the youth in these communities, because we want to make sure people are sort of in tune with their civic duty at a young age, so that people can get out to vote early. And it seems like we're doing a bad job at it right now. And I just want to know if there is something. I think some other communities are doing better. I think the Jewish community does a really good job. I think the Muslim community, on the other hand, I think is struggling with that. So just want to know what you think about getting the youth involved early in elections.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, like these are hard to reach communities, right? And how do you get young people to vote? How do you get faith communities to vote? These are questions that I struggle with every day. And what I found is that oftentimes it's really one by one. It's doing the hard work of organizing our communities and having those one-on-one conversations. And I will say that in my earlier life, right now I work for Asian Texans, but in the past I was very much involved in the Muslim community. And I found that when I would go to the mosque and try to register people, I was kind of this lone voice, like register to vote, register to vote. And there used to be a time, at least in the Muslim community, this is like 2000s, where people would actually say it's against my religion to vote. So we've come a long way in the Muslim community. I would say I don't see that anymore. You don't see Muslims like saying crazy things like that. Like it's not allowed to vote. I mean, that is the thing of the past, I'm happy to say. But what I would find is little old me, waiving a voter registration application was very different than when the khatib, the person who actually gives the Friday sermon, saying, hey, everyone, elections are coming up. We as the community need to vote. There is a table outside. I encourage you to go register to vote. There was a credibility that comes from the leadership that just doesn't come from anyone else. So I think if we can get our leaders to really understand how important this is, that does a lot and seeps down into the wider community. And so I would say if we can get our leadership on board, those are trusted messengers and people will listen to them. So for example, if I did that and the khatib also said you should register to vote, it was a difference between me registering 5 people and me registering 25 people. I mean, literally that much of a difference. How do we get young people to vote? the things that we're really we're not a big group. We're like 5 people, and a lot of my staff members are young, which is great because I'm not young, but they have great ideas. And so what we've been doing this past year is utilizing social media, and we actually have a content creator residency program where we subgrant to Asian young Texan creators and have them talk about voting, but not like lecture them like you should vote, right? They like if they are a food creator, then they will do a recipe and then they'll just talk about voting as they're making the recipe. And then we give them a stipend in order to do that. And they in turn impart that information to the Gen Z audience. And then they will give our website where we have like a, we tell them how to register to vote. So you have to think outside the box, like that. Those old school methods just are not working in this environment, and you got to try everything. We're doing YouTube ads. So the Asian seniors spend a lot. Like my mom, she wakes up and she's retired, and all she does is she's on YouTube all day long. She's watching her Pakistani dramas. So we got to meet them where they're at. So we're doing YouTube in-language YouTube ads that target Asian seniors, Chinese or South Asian. So we got to think outside the box and get that information to them.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Time is up. Thank you so much, Nabila. This was really, really very informational and very helpful. We have recorded this thing, but if there's anyone who wants a copy of Nabila's presentation, I don't know if it's copyrighted or would you share it with us?
I can share it with you, Mohammed, and you can share it out with folks.
All right. Okay. So thank you so much. Our next meeting is on June 1st, Monday, and thanks to Julie's help, we do have a speaker, Shannon Flores from offshore wind energy, and she's going to be talking about environmental justice in that industry. So tune in. She's going to be. She's really excited to be able to be our keynote speaker for June 1st, same time. Yes, Roger.
Just want to remind about our meeting coming up on the 19th of May over at the Bay Area Community Center. We'll be having Albert Whitlet. He'll be a speaker. He's running for state rep.
Yeah. And before the meeting, there's a primary runoff coming up. Early voting starts on the 18th of May, runs to the 22nd, and the election itself is on the 26th. And they just wait for information on the website or my emails or anything. Just don't skip that election. It's extremely, extremely important.
Important. Yep.
Yes, Ruth. You had a question with your left hand. Okay. All right, guys. Is there anything else? Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.